The city of Chicago is known to travelers for its diverse cuisine, culture, and communities. But those of us who call it home know there's a whole world outside the city limits. With nearly 10 million residents across 8 counties, the country's third largest metro area is full of great places to live, eat, work, and play. As a real estate agent serving the suburbs, I have the privilege every day to get to know the people and places that make this Sweet Home Chicagoland. Hey there, welcome back to Sweet Home Chicagoland. I'm Chris Grano, your host. This is the podcast where we talk to the people and we look at the places that make Chicago suburbs an amazing place to live. So I'm super excited about today's guest. For anybody who knows me, knows that I'm actually a Naperville realtor. And so I love talking to folks in my hometown area of Naperville. And today our guests are Gina and Paul Curtis of Acton Academy, a brand new school coming to Naperville this fall. So I'd like to welcome them. Gina and Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Chris.
So I like to start out our conversations with everyone. We'll definitely get into talking about the school and, what this means to you guys and what this means to students who are going to be joining you. But I always like to find out, what is your connection to the Chicagoland area? Did you guys grow up here? Did you move here? And what's your connection with it so far?
Sure, we're lifers.
Yep. Yep. I grew up in the southwest suburbs, specifically Hickory Hills. Pretty much until now I'm here in Naperville.
And I've pretty much lived in Naperville my whole life. And I came back right after college, and you can't beat Naperville.
No, I mean, it's one of the greatest places in the western suburbs, and and Chicago suburbs in general are a phenomenal place to raise a family. And I know that education is obviously a huge part of that. So people want to know, where's the best place I can send my kid to school? And that is one of the conversations that comes up all the time for me, of course, in real estate, when people are asking about what school districts are there and what are the differences between the schools. And you all probably know that, Naperville in particular, I mean, there are pretty big differences between some of the different schools in the area. So I'd love to know, what kind of a school is Acton Academy?
Yeah. So we are a private K-8 Montessori inspired school. We are going to be located in North Naperville. Some families refer to us or our approach as kind of Montessori plus.
Yeah, and kind of add to that, we classify ourselves as a micro school. So we are and always will be a small, exclusive community for our learners.
We are registered with the Illinois State Board of Education, and we are accredited with the International Association of Learner-Driven Schools. We are offering 3 programs for next year, for the 2021-2022 school year. We have a lower elementary program, an upper elementary program, and a middle school, and we will open our high school as our learners grow.
Wonderful. So this is exciting, and I think, really what folks who are listening want to know is probably, what was the motivation to even start Acton Academy?
Yeah. I mean, our kids. I think every parent, right, would agree that, their kids are the reason for so many of the things that they do. But we looked at our kids. Our daughter is 6. We have a son that's 3, and then we have 2 twins, infants. And we just looked at how naturally curious they are and how much they love learning and they love school. And then you look kind of as they get older and older, and you see that just kind of fade. And we didn't want that to happen for our daughter. So when she was about 2 or 3 years old, we really just started talking about what we wanted for her education. And we knew that we wanted to keep that spark alive.
Yep. And then, in addition to that, living in Naperville, there's great schools, great public schools, parochial schools, Montessori, even Waldorf schools if we need it. So we really looked at what are the different opportunities we have when we started, deciding what's the type of education we want for our daughter. And so we did the research, and we kind of stumbled upon Acton just through kind of web searching and everything, and reading about it, learning about it, and fell in love.
Yeah, in doing all this research and considering all the different options, we fell in love with Acton Academy, and we knew it's exactly what we wanted for our children's education. But there was no Actons really in our area. And so Paul suggested, he said, why don't we just open one? And I thought that was absolutely crazy, but here we are 3 years later, and we're ready to open our doors in August.
So where is the Acton based out of locale wise?
Yeah, so the original Acton Academy was founded in Austin, Texas. Just over a decade ago, a couple, Jeff and Laura Sandifer, were faced with the challenge of deciding where to send their two sons after they had kind of aged out of their Montessori program. And they reimagined what school could and should look like and just kind of took a chance and opened up this little school. And the school has really just exploded from there.
Yep.
That's awesome.
It's really caught the attention of families all over the world in the last decade.
Right. Yep, and right now there's over 250 Actons globally operating right now. So it's grown a lot. It's gone from 10, 12 years ago to 250 now.
Yeah, wow. So the model's really had a chance to be proven over that time too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool about these schools is that each independent Acton was founded by parents. So every school, every Acton Academy has that the parents are personally invested in the success of the school. These are parents who believe that there is a better way to educate their children, and they want to help other like-minded families in the community.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. And I love the two of you with your entrepreneurial spirit, especially doing this in a time when you have such, young kids. Obviously that's the impetus for it. But I know as a parent of two young kids, how difficult, and you have four. So you guys are awesome. Good for you.
Thanks.
We've got some help from family and friends locally. That's making this a little bit easier.
That's good. That's always important. Okay. So what's the approach to this education? Like, how does it stem from, and what makes it unique?
So I think a couple things that make it unique. One, we are truly learner driven. By that, we mean that the children are in charge of their learning and the space that they learn in. So each of our learners has a personalized learning plan. They set individual goals for their learning. So they're really working based on their passions and their goals and their family's goals to get their own unique educational experience. And I think the second thing that also makes Acton Academy really unique and Arrow Academy really unique, just speaking about that entrepreneurial spirit, is that we integrate entrepreneurship into our curriculum. And that sounds really funny at first to elementary school kids, entrepreneurship, like those two things don't typically match up. But we have our young learners, even our preschoolers, opening their own businesses every year. And when you think about the academic and the social emotional skills that are required to successfully run a business, it makes a lot of sense that that's actually part of the curriculum. So like I said, every year our learners, even the youngest ones, are building their own businesses from the ground up and creating and selling their own products and services. We sponsor a children's business fair every year that gives our learners and other kids in the community a chance to hone their entrepreneurial skills. Our older learners actually start doing apprenticeships at local businesses so they can start getting real world experience and exposure to different fields of work. So I think that's also something that really sets us apart.
Yep.
That piece is really exciting because, how many times have people, I think especially my generation and maybe younger than me, have said, boy, I wish somebody in school would have taught me these real world things. Right. And that's wonderful. And I resonate with that. I don't think you can start a kid too young on understanding how to do those things. And, any business transaction involves money too. Right. And I think it's good to start kids understanding what money is. So they can learn how to be responsible little adults and one day, so that's wonderful.
Yeah. I think that's really the crux of what we're doing too, is really preparing children for the real world, preparing them to be 21st century adults. That's what we're trying to do.
That's what education should be, right? It's not necessarily teaching kids certain things. It's teaching them how to be human beings so that when they go off on their own, they can exist in this world on their own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. So there are some other unique things about the school. I saw on the website it says you don't have homework, tests, teachers, or report cards. And if I was a kid, that sounds like the greatest thing in the world.
Right?
But I know that it means more than that. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we hope that learners see that and they're like, yes, we want to go to this school, no homework. But people really say that Acton academies have turned learning upside down. And when you hear things like that, no homework, no tests, that sounds kind of crazy. But especially if you've grown accustomed to a certain way of doing school. But then when you start to dig into it, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So to just kind of explain each of those points, what we don't have. So instead of teachers, we have guides, and guides do exactly what it sounds like. They guide learners in their learning journey. So they serve more as coaches and resources instead of lecturers or evaluators. They're there to really just kind of set up guardrails and offer resources to make sure that learning is safe and constructive. But we believe that the learners and their families are really in charge of their learning. And we also believe that the tools that we use and the learners themselves are way more effective than just one single teacher in a classroom can be. We also, like I said, you said we don't have homework, we don't have tests. We believe that the time that's dedicated to learning during our school hours, the tools that we use, the way that we implement those tools are powerful and effective enough on their own that kids don't need to be spending hours practicing them outside of the school day. As a parent, I love knowing that our time after school is ours. Our weekend time belongs to us. We're not doing homework and projects and running out to, the store at 8 p.m. on a Sunday to try to finish a project. And then finally, we don't have report cards. So our learners earn badges to show that they've mastered material. So earning a badge is the equivalent to getting an A+ or 100% in a subject. So our learners are proving that they've mastered things. But in addition, they're also demonstrating what they know through public exhibitions of their work. So at the end of each of our learning sessions, our learners and their families and members of the community come in to actually see and evaluate the work that our learners have done during that session. So they're actually showing off, here's what we made, here's what we built, here's what we've done, and getting that public evaluation of their work.
That's great. I love you mentioned several times the integration with family. And I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. I think one of the tough things about our education system here in America is, and this is not to fault the education system at all, but it lends itself to a little bit of that separation where the parents don't necessarily have to be involved. And sometimes, maybe it's job or their family situation, they can't be as much as they'd like to, but that puts a stress, I think, on the child's ability to learn. And it also puts a stress on the family relationship. So it's amazing that you guys have found a way to be able to integrate those two things so well.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So, okay. So then tell me, you've described really some unique things. And so what is a typical day then? If I'm going to send my child to school, what does a typical day look like there?
Sure. Yeah, so typically, each day we start with gathering and with the learners with something called a Socratic style discussion. These discussions kind of set the tone for the day. They offer a bit of inspiration before our learners dive into their core academic work for the day. Our learners also spend their mornings focused on core skills, mostly math and literacy. They use adaptive technology to do this. We kind of touched on this a little bit already, but just to go into a little bit more specifics, like Khan Academy or Dreambox, IXL, Alexia are some of the tools that we use, and then break up the morning with opportunities for physical activity and other outdoor play, as well as time for elective work with music, art, language as well. So they kind of get a little bit of everything, and time to focus in those areas as well.
And I think what really sets us apart too is then in the afternoon, our afternoons are dedicated to doing quests. Quests are real world projects that require real world skills to complete. So our learners are completing a series of challenges over a series of weeks that lead to that public exhibition of their work. So these projects usually integrate social studies and STEM skills. Quests are collaborative, so they're working with their peers to deliver a final product. Some of the quests that we'll be doing next year are a community garden, coding and robotics, a simulation of ancient Greece, a detective-themed quest. So they're fun, and kids are learning a ton as they're doing them too.
And what a neat way for them to be exposed to different different areas of expertise and maybe discover what they want to do, for a future career through those type of quests. That's really neat.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Wow. That's fantastic. I love the idea too. You mentioned just starting the day with like the discussion. I mean,
Right.
and so my son, Gina, you and I had a chance to talk a little bit before we recorded. My son is 4 and he's, got a brand new baby sister, and he is just in this point where he just asks questions about everything. Right. And it's nonstop questions. And I love it because I want him to, and I'll probably throw things at him that maybe he's not ready for, but it's amazing what they retain and what they absorb. And he'll come back to me with follow-up questions that I'm like, oh, I didn't really even know, that you really understood. So that's a great opportunity for them to be able to really absorb and learn from their peers too, right?
Yeah.
I think one of
That's great.
the eye-opening things for me with that style is completely different than what I've used to. It was
Right.
when we went to Austin and kind of saw it in action and in what was happening, and it was really nice to see. The students were really driven by it. They all worked well together in this type of discussion, and it really set the tone for the day.
Yeah.
That's neat. Yeah, and it probably makes them feel much more involved, and
Right.
like their voice can be heard, which is
Right.
really important, beyond the classroom, right? That's a huge human need to have our thoughts and our opinions valued by others. So that's great.
And I think that taps into that learner-driven bit a little bit more too, is just that these discussions, they're centered on what's important for these learners, but then they ultimately take charge of those discussions later. So the idea by being learner-driven is that we're trying to hand all this stuff over to the learners eventually. So they're leading those discussions and they're leading the projects. It's not an adult doing it. It's them and what they're interested in and what's important to them.
I love that. That's wonderful. So, as you're telling me about these unique experiences, I have the limitations, kind of like you both said, we all sort of kind of grew up through the traditional system.
Yeah.
So I'm in my mind, I'm trying to think, okay, then how does this apply to moving forward, to that next level of education or whatever? So what kind of results are you seeing? And again, I don't mean to compare necessarily to the public system or the parochial system, but what are these results that you're seeing students out of that Acton model achieve?
Yeah, sure. So we're starting to get now some of the first Acton graduates, and they're heading out into the world. Some have taken the entrepreneurship path after establishing such a strong foundation with the Acton model. Others, they've gone on to the college route and have been accepted into some very competitive universities.
And we don't place a great deal of emphasis on standardized testing in the Acton model,
Sure.
But we do offer families an opportunity to voluntarily test to get some data and some feedback on our model. And what we see is that Acton learners regularly are scoring 1 or 2 grade levels higher than their peers. So in terms of learning foundational academic skills, we're confident that this model works. But I think what's more important when you consider results is that the feedback that we hear from parents and we read about from parents all over the country and all over the world really is that their kids love learning again. The joy is back, that spark is back in their children's eyes, and that's so much more important to us than test scores, right? They love learning, they love being at school, and if that's what we can get out of this, then that's a success.
Yeah, right. 100%. I mean, as a parent, I totally resonate with that because, I mean, what is the point of school if, like, we already discussed it a little bit, but to prepare your child for the world, and that can mean a lot of things. And we all measure success in different ways. It may be financial success. It may be success with a family, maybe success with a mission-oriented calling. So whatever that is, if you're producing those kind of results, who cares about the standardized test?
Right. And I mean, we really believe too, one of the things that we repeat a lot and say a lot in our environment is that we believe that who can find a calling and change the world. And that sounds really lofty, but we do believe, I mean, it's true that when you're able to pursue your passions and really discover a lot about yourself and how you learn best, you can go out there and you can ultimately, find what your true calling and passion is in life.
Oh yeah. And it's not too young at all to start putting that, and empowering children with that mindset. That's the last thing that we say before I drop my son off for preschool every morning is make the world a better place,
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. So then what type of students would benefit from Aero Academy?
Well, like I just said, we believe that every child is a genius, and we believe that every child can change the world. And we really do believe that children are capable of way more than what is expected of them in a traditional educational setting. But so really, we believe that every child can benefit from being in the Acton model and being at Aero Academy, but we know that it's not for everybody. Different kids thrive in different environments. Some learners thrive in public school environments. Some thrive in a traditional Montessori environment, and some learners are going to thrive with us too. But we believe that the types of learners that are going to thrive most at Aero Academy are those that tend to lean a little bit more toward being independent and self-motivated. And of course, those are skills that we work on too in our school, but kids that have a natural inclination that way are really going to do well. Kids who like having a lot of choice and a lot of freedom and flexibility in how they spend their day are really going to thrive with us. And even though we're not a school for gifted learners, we do find that exceptional learners do tend to thrive in our environment as well, just because, again, kids have the time and the space to pursue their passions, to dig deeply into the things that are important to them and interesting to them. And so I think in that way, a lot of those types of learners will do well where we are.
Yeah, and then just as important as the learners, when they apply to Aero Academy, it's really the family that's applying to Aero Academy, and we're looking for families who are comfortable giving their children freedom of choice, allowing them to take risks, learning from their mistakes, and then the biggest, embracing a growth mindset, and making sure they want to be part of this community. So as much as it is the learners, it's also the families that might have to take a look at the education, the trials, and the things that they'll run into a little bit differently than if they were to go to a traditional school.
Absolutely. Well, and we talked about that, how important that is anyway. So it's wonderful that you're fostering that, letting people know right from the very beginning, this has got to be a whole family approach.
Yep.
So with that in mind, as you guys head into your first school year this fall, what advice would you give to families as they plan and, as they head into the school year, or for somebody who's looking to potentially be a part of Aero Academy this fall?
Yeah, I mean, this year was obviously the most challenging year that parents will ever have in terms of educating their children. Hopefully it never gets worse than this. But,
yeah, right.
we hope, if nothing else, that this last year has led families to realize that school doesn't have to look exactly like this model that most of us have grown up with, or most of us have become accustomed to. And we hope that they've realized that their children can learn in different environments and in different settings. So as families are considering, what they want to do next year, and what next year is going to look like for them, we just want to remind them that they have a choice when it comes to school. We have so many amazing options in Chicagoland. We have so many choices for school. So do your research, see what's out there. Look for a school that reflects your family's values, reflects your family's goals for what you want out of your children's future and for your children's future. And we hope we can be that for some families.
Wonderful. Well, I'm sure that it's going to catch on pretty quick. And I have to ask you, do you anticipate down the line, as growth happens, potentially future locations throughout the Chicagoland area, or am I throwing too far ahead?
No. Well, I should mention too that this is a Chicagoland podcast. There are a couple Actons throughout the suburbs. There is one a little bit further north in the Palatine area. There's 3 in the city as well. But hopefully, as this approach grows, we will see more Actons and hopefully more Aeros popping up in this area too.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's very exciting. Well, and you guys are still certainly definitely on the forefront of it and bringing it to the Naperville area, which is an area that has always valued good education. So I think people are going to be really excited about a new option with this type of model. How can people find out more?
Yeah, so our website is a great resource, arrowacton.com. You can request an info kit on there, find out more about our admissions process, and RSVP for a virtual open house. We've got some virtual open houses coming up in the next month or so here. Additionally, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. But if you contact us through any of those channels and mention this podcast, we will send you a free copy of the book, Courage to Grow. It's a book that was written by the original founder of Acton Academy, down in Austin. And it just gives a really nice overview of what this approach to learning is all about. So we'd love to get those in people's hands.
Wonderful. Well, that's a very nice gift. So thank you for offering that to the listeners. Is there anything else, Gina and Paul, that I should talk about, that I should ask you before we sign off today?
No, I thank you. So I think we hit it all. I thank you so much. I hope we were able to share what this model is really all about.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I can't wait to see as you get up and running this fall and check back in with you, see how things are going. And I'm sure once things get a little bit less crazy in our world, then people at some point, I'm sure, will be able to come and visit, right, and see for themselves what things are like. So that's fantastic. Well, thank you guys for caring about your kids and for caring about other kids. I'm a big believer that the way that we are going to make the world a better place and make our country a better place, it all starts with the family. And so you guys are a great example of that. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. As always, to our listeners and viewers, follow us on YouTube. You can go to sweethomechicagoland.com or follow us on all the major podcast platforms. Gina, Paul, good luck to you guys. And we'll talk to you again down the line.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.